Hey cutie. Welcome back or welcome to my channel if you're new. My name is Laura. Hi, hello, welcome. Fun fact, I have this incredible knack of wearing the same shirt for the same project updates. I do it all the time. And this is no different. I am filming my No Pan Left Behind wearing the same exact shirt that I wore in my last update video. I promise I have clothing. This is my No Pan Left Behind update for March. I know so many of you guys are also doing No Pan Left Behind projects or just trying to touch your eyeshadows as much as possible, and you guys letting me know how you're doing always inspires me to do a little bit better in this project as well. And I have some lofty goals for myself this year for what I want to do with my No Pan Left Behind, and really I would love to finish No Pan Left Behinding all of my palettes before the end of the year, but right now we are just kind of tracking progress month to month for the hope, the dream, the goal to touch every single eyeshadow in my collection before the end of the calendar year. So before December 31st of 2024, I want to touch every single eyeshadow that is in my collection at any given point. By the end of the year, I want every single thing that's in my collection at that given point used. I don't remember who I saw or who created the concept of No Pan Left Behind, but there are so many people that I follow on Instagram and YouTube that do No Pan Left Behind content, and they really inspire me, and then your guys' comments always inspire me as well. I have a lot of information from my previous updates this year because we did start things fresh. If you don't know, I did this challenge last year and actually completed my goal of No Pan Left Behinding everything in my collection. At the introduction, I actually had 748 different pans of eyeshadow to use in my collection, and in January, I actually did bring a couple palettes into my collection. One I purchased, so it impacted my eye bank. One was PR, so it did not impact my eye bank. But last month, I ended up bringing in enough shadows to put me at 770 eyeshadow pans that I had to touch in some capacity this year. And throughout the month of February, I actually have decided to rehome some palettes. They're going to a friend, a fellow YouTuber, a fellow Instagrammer, a fellow makeup lover. Still, Steph, I've been saying this for a while, but I've been waiting to film this No Pan Left Behind update to pass these things on. So I do have a few palettes that will be departing my collection. We'll talk about that later this video. So all in all, starting the month of March, I have 728 different pans of eyeshadow to use in some capacity. Out of the 728 pans of eyeshadow I've actually used a whopping total of 187 of those pans, which is 25% of my collection so far this year has been used, which is actually incredible. A little over 2 months in now, and I've touched a quarter of my collection, which means in theory, I can finish this project before the end of the year if I keep the same momentum and try to hit 25% of my collection every 2 months. That means I could meet the goal of No Pan Left Behinding way earlier than December, which is really what I would like to do, is to finish this project before December. I kind of want to do it before October, so that way the last couple months of the year I can just play with whatever the heck I want. But I'm really finding myself wanting to focus in my Pan That palette this year, so usage and everything else is kind of slowing down a little bit because I've been so focused on my Pan That palette this year. I don't know what happened. All in all, in February, I actually used 72 different pans of eyeshadow, like different pans of eyeshadow in the month, which isn't my best month of usage, if I'm being honest. Last month, I believe in January, I did like 100 and something different pans of eyeshadow. So the month of February having such fewer shades is kind of a bummer. However, I know there was things I was focusing on in February to actually finish or hit pan in certain things. I do have a lot of goals and a lot of things that I still need to touch in my collection. However, before we get into like kind of the future goals and everything like that, I do want to just talk about the palettes that I did end up No Pan Left Behinding, as well as the items that are leaving my collection this month and going to a new and better home that will love and cherish them a little bit more than I will. I did focus on 4 palettes to completely no pan left behind. I mean, in all fairness, I focused on a lot of palettes to try to no pan left behind, and I really was trying to finish more pans with my no pan left behind. However, I am still happy that I at least got 4 different palettes completed. My goal is 4 palettes every month. That will get me to my full collection being used by the end of the calendar year. So as long as I get 4 palettes every single month, I'm going to feel really accomplished in this project. However, I really would like to try to expedite and increase the number of palettes I'm using because I want to finish this project well before the end of the year. Again, I want to finish this a couple months before the end of the year. So I do have the palettes that I hit no pan left behind in the order that I actually hit them. So early in the month, I say early very loosely, I had a trip in the month of February at the very beginning of the month. And so everything just kind of felt like I was rushing to make up time, if that makes sense. Like I was gone the first 5 days of the month. So I just felt really behind the 8 ball with every other aspect of the month. So by Valentine's Day, so midway in the month of February, is actually when I first hit a no pan left behind, which seems like, girl, you were 2 weeks in and you just hit a no pan left behind. But that was because of the collaboration video I did with Jen from Project Beauty. I no pan left behind my retro palette from Natasha Denona, and mainly it was because of that video. I used a bunch of these shades in a look for that video for a romantic date night look, and I featured my Natasha Denona retro palette. So if you want some inspo for a palette, like a look using this palette, I'll link it in the cards. A couple days later, I actually hit no pan left behind on 2 palettes in the same day. I believe these were both either the 17th or 18th of February, but I did hit no pan left behind on the newest palette in my collection, which was sent to me in PR by Fantasy Cosmetica. This is the Wizard palette. This I was wearing in, I think it was my Pan That Palette February update, and you guys loved the look that I was wearing. It was featuring these yellow tones and some of these deeper, darker shades, but this is so pretty, and I definitely don't gravitate towards blues and periwinkles, but this is such a beautiful palette. I really love the inclusion of these 2 yellows. It gives very much Starry Nights. I think this shade Conjuration is so pretty, but Meteor Storm is probably my favorite shade in that palette. It is so pretty, but these are so gorgeous, absolutely stunning. So that's that middle yellow shade, and then the top middle blue. So pretty. Unbelievably pretty. So I did no pan left behind this gorgeous palette. Again, thank you Fantasy Cosmetica for sending this my way. I know I've been saying that I have some look videos with this palette specifically. I do have those. They will be coming soon as TikTok short, TikToks or Reels or something. I've just been reading and enjoying time outside since the weather has been warming up, so I've been slacking. Then on top of that, I ended up hitting no pan left behind on one of my favorite palettes in my collection. This is the Sugar Drizzle On Top of the Mountains and Beneath the Stars palette, and this is a mouthful of a palette name, oh my gosh, but technically this is a cheek highlight palette, but I bought it to use as iridescent topper shades. This was before I had purchased the Cleona topper shades, and I fell in love with them, and because of this palette I ended up purchasing the bundle of the multi-chromes. Anyway, I love this palette. I did no pan left behind the shades. I think I have these, it was either these 3 left. Either way, I hit the goal on it, and I was very happy about that. I love this palette. And then lastly, it's going to throw off my white balance, but I did no pan left behind my Natasha Denona Purple Blue palette. And this is going to be a good one to segue us into what I've decided to declutter, because I did actually decide to declutter my Purple Blue palette. I really appreciate and enjoyed the shades in here. However, I did actually swap a few shades out of this palette, and then I moved a couple other shades into this one. I'm decluttering this. This is going to Steph. I'm happy that Steph's going to be using this palette. I hope you don't mind that I did take a couple shades out and put some shades into this palette. I figure you won't mind. I did no pan left behind everything before I swapped shades out. But yeah, this is going to a better home. But yeah, that was all 4 palettes that I did no pan left behind. on top of that Natasha Denona purple blue palette that's leaving my collection. I mentioned it before in another video, but I have decided to rehome my Lunar Lavender palette. Again, nothing wrong with this palette. Actually, it's quite a beautiful palette. Maybe my favorite purple palette in my collection. These shades of purple I absolutely love. I love these two like duochrome toppers, but I just don't need this palette. I have shades like this in my collection in other palettes, and then I think I'm just on kind of like a decluttering kick. Initially I was only going to send those two palettes to Steph and kind of call it a day, but I was looking through my stash before filming this video, and I realized I don't see myself really loving on this palette either, and it's, again, nothing wrong with the quality, and if anything, these palettes have some of my favorite quality eyeshadows in it, and it's another Kaleidos palette. This is the Astro Pink palette, but I did take some shades out from the Electro Turquoise palette and put it in here. So these first two shades are from the Electro Turquoise palette, and then the other four are from this palette in and of itself. I think this palette is gorgeous, especially like when it was just the original. I think my reverbed one is great, but I think that I just have these shades over and over in my collection. I'm not gravitating towards this, and I just don't need this to rot away in my collection when it could be getting so much love from someone else. So for the month of March, I usually have a certain goal to try to use all of my green eyeshadows in a month, and I don't think I'm going to be able to do that this month. I think I have a different approach to my makeup right now than trying to use everything all at once. I am really, again, focused on my Pan That palette, so I need things to pair with this, and I feel like I'm just taking a much more humble approach to my No Pan Left Behind because of that this year. So in the month of March, I do want to use 4 different palettes, No Pan Left Behind style. So I want to completely use every single shade in 4 palettes at least this month. Some of them are from like projects that we have going on that you know about. So I have my Project Level Up palette here. I'm not going to open it. I will link it in the cards. However, I do have a few shades in this palette left to use. 2, 3, 4. I have 4 or 5 pans in this palette to use before I No Pan Left Behind this palette. But this is a palette that I'm focusing on in my Project Level Up. I have a couple straggler palettes from my winter palette rotation. So the first one in my winter palette rotation that I'm fairly sure I can hit my No Pan Left Behind is my Ninhydrin palette. There's only one pan left in this palette as of now to use to meet that goal, and it's going to be the easiest one in the palette to reach for this month. So I'm really excited about hitting that goal for this palette. Again, one more shade is all I need to do for this palette. So if I don't hit No Pan Left Behind on this palette, it's kind of embarrassing. The other winter-y palette rotation is going to actually transition to my spring rotation, so a little spoiler for that one. But it is a very, like, transitional palette, in my opinion. This is the Natasha Denona Retro Glam palette. As the cover alludes, you get pinks and you get kind of like sagey colors. So this palette here, I think is going to be perfect for this time of year. I've actually already reached for the pink shades, the 3 pinks in this palette. I have already touched and used. So I'm really excited to reach for this palette again. I think this is perfect for like this transitional period of going from winter to spring. Things are still kind of teetering with weather here in Michigan. So I think that this is really perfect. And honestly, these kind of tones, like the kind of more sagey greens and like grayed out greens, I think fit the theme for the weather outside right now too, because it's kind of murky and like that wet spring where everything is kind of damp and like muted down. So I think these shades are actually perfect for this time of year. I do have my drawer. You're not even going to be able to see it, but I do have a drawer over here that has all of my like rotational palettes in it. So I already have pulled my spring rotation of palettes out. It's living in that drawer there. We will talk about those in a future video, what is my spring rotation, but there is going to be a palette in there somewhere. I haven't decided, but I do have palettes in there I would like to focus on in the months for spring. So I will be pulling a palette out of there to try to No Pan Left Behind as well. So I only want to really focus on 4 palettes, but if I can knock these 3 palettes out as well, since they're so itty bitty small, I would be really, really happy to kind of blow through at least 1 or 2 of these palettes this month as well. And they're just like my 5-pan Natasha Denona palettes. So one of them would be super, super easy because I've completely damaged and destroyed shades out of it. However, I will try to actually use up what's left in the corners to try to like give myself a little bit more oomph and like, yeah, you dropped the palette like a ding dong, Laura, but at least like you used the stuff that was left out of it. I also have this guy, which again is a very easy palette to use. This is the Camel palette. All of my Natasha Denona 5-pan palettes like this, all of the packaging has broken, which is infuriating. Then this palette is kind of where I put all of the shades that I took out of the Natasha Denona purple palette and stored them in. There's 2 shades from this original palette that I still need to use for my No Pan Left Behind. But this guy here is just kind of like a really everyday palette. So I have like 1 matte, neutral, everyday kind of shade, and then I have 4 like everyday shimmers. So again, I could use this for every day to the office when I go, but I will try to at least knock 1 of these small palettes out of the way as well. So maybe 5 palettes for the month of March. If we can just kind of start doing 5 palettes every month, we'll get this project done a lot earlier. If I want to finish everything by June, I need to touch 10 eyeshadow palettes a month. I don't think that's doable, but I do think I could do 5 or 6 palettes a month, especially if I am at least gravitating and like using a shade from different palettes, like more than 4 palettes. Am I making sense? If I'm focusing on like a palette that I'm trying to No Pan Left Behind, like this guy, and I say, oh, I'm going to pair this with this guy one day, and I'm like majority using this palette, and then I'm sneaking a couple shades from this guy in. That way I'm getting more use out of more shades that might not have been used while still No Pan Left Behinding. So it's just a usage game. You guys know, we're just trying to use the collection this year in any way that we can. And I am finding myself on a downtick of spending money on makeup, which has been really, really good. So this project in combination with my eye bank has been really eye-opening with just how outrageous my like consumption of eyeshadow has become. I just don't need that. It's a frivolous thing. Like makeup is just something we put on for like fun, and it's become something that I spend way too much money on. So I would rather spend money on like my dog or my husband, my house, that kind of stuff. So I've just kind of put my head in a different direction for my spending habits now, which has been really eye-opening for me. So if you're doing this, I hope that you feel the same. You want to use your collection a little bit more, and you realize how long it takes to use your collection than just buying the next cool thing. So it's been helping me out with this project. So I would love it if it helps you out with your projects. But that is it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you're staying healthy, sane, and safe, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye.